Hello and welcome to a breaking news podcast here at Mavericracy. My name is Adrian Avil, and today I will be talking about Israel's highly anticipated retaliation against Iran, which took place in the early hours of October 26, 2024. We will discuss the targets that Israel chose to strike. We will also discuss why. We will analyze the whole impact and potential impact and potential reaction of Iran. We will also look at the connections, the international relations connections with the United States and other major players and actors, the international reactions as well. So let's go into it. But it is very important to start this episode off by talking about the original attack against Israel, having a recap here about the Iranian attack against Israel that took place in early October. This is important because Israel has been portrayed as the aggressor already in the media. Israel is being portrayed as a country that just apparently strikes Iran for fun, and obviously no apparent reason. And there are certain reactions already from countries, which we'll dive into later as well, that make Israel look as the aggressor, and Iran also claims the victimhood card here by saying that they have a right to defend themselves. So let's actually jump in why Israel retaliated against Iran to begin with. In early October, Iran launched the largest ballistic missile barrage in history against Israel, with approximately 200 ballistic missiles, which were aimed at mainly Tel Aviv and Nevatim Air Base. Nevatim houses the advanced F-35 fighter jets that Israel has. They also used Haveh cruise missiles and Shahed drones as well to target critical infrastructure. Overall, they targeted sites across all of Israel pretty much, but yeah, their main focus was Tel Aviv. They tried to hit the Mossad headquarters as well, the IDF headquarters. They tried to destroy F-35 jets in Nevatim, as I said. So these were their hopes and dreams they had, but this did not occur. Israel had actually all their F-35s in the air. So there was no fighter jet lost on the Israeli side. However, the attack showcased that Iran is a major threat to Israel, even though Israel has various defense systems. We have Iron Dome in Israel that we can observe against short-range threats, always used against strikes from Hezbollah and Hamas against Israel. But we also have David Sling in Israel, which are medium-range interceptors, and then the Arrow system, which defends against high-speed threats at high altitudes and long ranges. So Israel has a multi-layered defense system here. And even though most missiles were intercepted, we have to say that the sheer missile volume and also the fact that Iran actually employed advanced ballistic missiles showed that some of these actually penetrated Israel's air defenses and actually found their targets. There were a dozen or so strikes reported in Nevatim Air Base. The actual impact of the attack was infrastructure damage, but still, it shows that Iran has the capacity to hurt Israel, even though the United States and Jordan and other countries helped in the defense against the missile attack as well. So here it is very important to understand the missile capabilities that Iran actually has. And here's an important factor to mention. It sounds like I'm a whistleblower at this point, but this is actually open source intelligence. Iran is using Western source components in their advanced missiles, but we will get into that in a second here. So overall, they're allegedly having an arsenal of around 3,000 ballistic missiles. but they have increasingly increased production of the advanced types Qadr, Emad, Taiba, Shekan, and the Fatah models. The Fatah missile, for example, can reach speeds above Mach 5, which makes it more complicated for defense system to intercept, of course. The Kaiba Shekan has increased speed and maneuverability, and also features the possibility of changing course mid-air, being able to trick missile defense systems, and thus making it much easier for them to evade interceptors. Nonetheless, Israel proved very capable of defending it, but it's not foolproof. And Iran's trump card here basically is the sheer amount of missiles they could potentially launch at the same time. They launched 200 the last time. If they launched a 400, 500 the next time, it would be much more devastating for sure. The thing is, how did they get these advanced missiles? Well, they acquired very important key components from Germany, France, the UK, but even the US, which helped them, mostly microchips, but we will go into detail in a second here. All these parts they obtained helped them to improve their missile guidance, evasion capabilities, propulsion, and also intelligent, smart features, being able to change course, etc., change speed, to make the job for missile interceptors much harder. They got microchips sourced via the United States and Germany, which they're using for guidance computers. They have gyroscopes, which were made in France originally, which help with their stability and targeting in their Qiam and Qadr missiles. Navigation systems, that components for the navigation systems that they got from the UK, which they're using in their Fatah missiles. So obviously they didn't buy those directly from Western countries, but they acquired them through third-party channels, mainly China, Russia, but also the UAE, which has to be mentioned here. And of course, the impact can be seen. Iran using Western technology in their missiles is a direct national security threat for Israel, and it should be addressed in among Western lawmakers and decision makers, because this is something that the West openly doesn't want, of course, but still doesn't really care about it, if we want to be honest here as well. At least not on that scale. It's not a priority, so it has to be pushed among lawmakers, decision makers in Western countries. But for this to happen, the West would have to stop selling these components to other third parties that trade with Iran, which makes it much more difficult, because either they stop selling them, which is not in their economic interests, or they try to get agreements with those third-party countries with promises that these components would not be sold to Iran, which would be the more naive route, because we can clearly see that even though many countries around the world have pledged not to trade with Russia because of the sanctions, Russia still receives pretty much all the components they need through third-party channels, with the full knowledge of these countries where the components are going to. So it would be rather naive to think that one could tell China or other countries that they can't sell certain components, resell certain components to Iran. Yeah, it is a very complicated topic here, but it forces Israel into a position where it has to react against an increasingly dangerous Iranian missile arsenal. And the Iranian regime is also increasing their knowledge of how to use their missiles with nuclear warheads. They don't have nuclear weapons yet. That's the whole discussion about how to prevent a nuclear Iran. But nonetheless, these are thoughts have to be considered here, and which Israel is considering, obviously, very thoroughly. So let's actually look now at the Israeli strike on Iran and what actually happened. The Israeli military dubbed it the Operation Days of Repentance, where Israel targeted military sites exclusively. So no oil sites, no nuclear sites. We will go into detail about the oil sites and nuclear sites and the reasoning later on. But for now, the idea was to degrade Iran's military capabilities, specifically when it comes to missile production and effectiveness. Israel targeted 5 military sites in Iran, including Kermanshah Air Base, which acts as a critical logistics hub for their missile deployments, as well as drone operations in the western part of Iran. And the damage and impact that the strike had was to disrupt their logistics there and to hinder their ability to effectively deploy missiles from that region. Israel also targeted the Parchin military complex, which is where they have a very important advanced missile technology research center, also storage and testing facilities. So here they develop a lot of these very advanced missiles, and the damage here is a setback for the regime, not only because of the storage facility destruction, but also because the R&D labs have been destroyed or damaged at least. So it delays the production and testing of advanced missiles. So it's a setback for the regime there as well. Israel also targeted the Qujir missile facility, which is a primary missile production center. So here, this is like the most important, or one of the most important facilities where they actually produce the weapons, the long-range ballistic missiles, and the Israeli strike, of course, reduced the missile production capacity of the country, and also the capability of deploying missiles. So again, we can see a pattern here already, right? Israel is aiming at delaying and hurting the Iranian capacity of hurting Israel with its missiles. That becomes even more clear when we look at the last 2 sites here as well. Same pattern in Isfahan, where Israel struck a drone production facility, like the Shahed drones, which are also being used in Ukraine. The Russians have been buying a lot of them from the Iranians. The Iranian regime also uses this site to supply their proxies. So it's a logistics hub in that sense as well. The damage done, of course, hampers the manufacturing lines, the ability to produce and supply drones, not only to their proxies, but also to their own forces that use these drones then to launch attacks against Israel. It's not fully clear if Israel also target what Israel exactly targeted in the Natanz facility, the site number 5. It is rumored that there's infrastructure which is critical for Iran's nuclear program in some way. Logistics hub, operational support hub. So it's hard to confirm this one already, and all the damage or the impact that the attack there had. Remember that everything is also under the fog of war. because both Israel and Iran obviously don't have an interest of revealing everything to the world. So it becomes more difficult, and we have to take the information that is coming through open source intelligence, as well as official confirmations from either countries, and then piece and puzzle these things together, basically. So on a assessment level, we can say that it has been a setback in their missile and drone production, deployment, and logistics. But it's not a major blow to the Iranian regime. It is a setback and a delay and a major nuisance, for sure. The biggest hit here is probably the strike against Iranian R&D facilities, as well as the strike on storage centers. Physically destroying missiles is good for Israel, because these missiles cannot be launched anymore against Israeli population centers and Israeli military sites and intelligence sites, obviously. So that helped out, but it is something the Iranian regime obviously can recover. However, Israel did demonstrate that it is capable of precisely targeting and degrading Iran's offensive potential. Why do I say this? Well, here we have to look at the Iranian air defense system. The regime has boasted about the effectiveness of their air defense system for a very long time. We all know the dramatic rhetoric Iran is using. They have said that their air defense system can take out any Zionist airplane, right? They've really exaggerated their capabilities. So now we've finally had a chance to observe empirically what happened. So Iran and their pride they take into their air defense systems is completely misplaced here. They're using various domestically produced air defense systems, and also Russian sourced ones. They have the Bavar 373, the S300, S200, Tor M1, Hawk systems, etc. that they're using. But how did they actually fare now? So we can already see, due to the fact that Israel did strike these military sites, that apparently if the air defense systems would have been effective, Israel would not have been able to manage to achieve that, right? That's very common sense. But the actual challenges for Iran's air defense are trying to actually find the Israeli airplanes because of Israel's stealth capabilities, especially with the F-35s, and the fact that Israel can avoid enemy radar. Also electronic warfare measures that interfere with Iranian radar, and the fact that Israel struck precisely, quickly, and with such sheer firepower that simply overwhelmed the defenses that Iran had. So we can actually say that overall their air defenses were largely useless, and showing that there are massive gaps in their capability of defending themselves against any Israeli retaliation strikes. We have to also keep in mind here that those are military sites which generally have a more dense anti-air defense network. When we're going to look at the other potential sites that Israel could have targeted in the next party of the podcast, we can actually see that a lot of these other non-military sites are much more vulnerable, much more exposed as well. So Israel hit the more difficult sites from a military perspective, and still achieved success there. So on a tactical level, on a military level, Israel did succeed very, very well here. Strategically, on a bigger scale, it is questionable how effective this strike was long term. Nothing is going to change here probably, because the regime can recover this. let's go into the actual part here of what could have hurt the regime, right? Things that could have increased the or helped with destabilizing the regime and maybe opening up, in the best case scenario, opening up path for the Iranian people to revolt against their regime. Something that has happened repeatedly in the last decade. It has always been crushed brutally by the Iranian regime. So yeah, the Iranian people also, Persian social media was full of pro-Israel praise, calling for liberation, asking Israel to bomb more regime targets as well. So it is something we have to keep in mind here, that the Iranian people are not fully behind the regime. Yes, there are a lot of regime supporters, of course, but there's at least half the country, if not more by now, who do not stand behind the Islamic Republic, who are pretty frantic towards Israel, who dream of more Western style system, democracy and human rights. The Persian people are not as radical as many of the other populations are in the Middle East. We can see this with a lot of exiled Persians as well, right? Around the world, who stand on the side of Israelis, who go to pro-Israel rallies, who openly support Israel, who want real peace with Israel, and who want the downfall of their regime. So the regime knows there's a credible and big threat from within, and only because they have such a strong grip on power, they're able to keep the power in the country. If the regime was hurt dramatically, this would change the equation here. This would be a different ball game, where Iranians would finally have the chance to topple the regime in the best case scenario. But let's jump into the potential impact on Iran if Israel actually had targeted the Iranian oil and nuclear sites. These were the other potential sites that Israel wanted to strike originally. However, there was a massive American pressure advising against doing that. There was a lot of House of Cards style plays going in the background between the United States and Israel in the last weeks. The United States did not want Israel to strike the oil and nuclear sites because of, in their perspective, potential for increased tensions, more escalation, a larger, widespread geopolitical impact, as well as economic impact, such as increase in oil prices around the world, for example. So yeah, the Biden administration was very, very strong in their position of pressuring Israel not to attack these sites. The attack on the nuclear sites was something the Americans rejected because they were afraid of radioactive fallout, as well as what I mentioned already, the fear of escalation and more tensions in the area, which is, on one hand, we can make a point for the American position here and say, yes, the Iranian regime would go all in if their nuclear sites would have been targeted, because, of course, the nuclear program is sort of a lifeline for the Iranian regime. If they were able to develop nuclear weapons, then they're pretty much safe from attack, right? They wouldn't have to fear that there's one day an American president who decides, that's it, we're gonna topple the regime here, and we're gonna go all in. It is a way also how North Korea preserved their regime by having the nuclear deterrence. So yeah, the Iranian regime definitely wants to get there, which is like a guarantee, a lifeline for them. On the other hand, if you don't do anything about their nuclear sites, then how can you prevent them, the Iranian regime, from getting the nuke in the first place? So back in the 1980s, Israel attacked a the nuclear facilities of Saddam Hussein in a very daring air raid. It was an ingenious operation launched from Israel, where Israel took out the entire nuclear program of Iraq, and did the world a massive favor there. So at some point, the nuclear threat of Iran has to be addressed. Various US presidents have tried to tackle it differently. The Obama administration, as well as the current Biden administration, tried it through the sanctions path, even though the Biden administration unfroze billions to the Iranian regime, which they used in return for their military terror efforts in the Middle East. That was a massive blunder. The Trump administration tried to contain Iran via sanctions and basically starve the regime of money, more effective than what Obama and Biden did, but still, of course, it did not topple the regime either. So yeah, the best way of getting rid of the regime without having to deploy boots on the ground, which is obviously very unpopular in the United States these days, and generally around the world, made America very unpopular as well. The best way is to starve the regime of money, similar to how Donald Trump did it, but then actively try to sponsor pro-democracy groups in Iran in order to topple the regime from within. I mean, the Americans were expert in toppling regimes, not always through direct military intervention, but by sponsoring various groups in the Cold War to fight communism and the spread of pro-Soviet groups around the world. So if America really wanted to, they could follow a similar path, right? The United States is not limited in funds, unlike Israel. If Israel, or when Israel has to act against the nuclear sites in Iran, it has to do so through sheer military force against precision strikes against the Iranian nuclear sites, etc. It's going to be a harder job for Israel, though, simply because the nuclear program is deeply embedded in mountains and underground. However, Israel does have bunker busters and advanced weapon systems that we don't even know of in the public that will surprise the Iranian regime. We can be pretty certain that Israel knows the threat and knows that it has to counter the nuclear sites, similar to how Israel prepared the pager attacks years in advance against Hezbollah, sold these pagers and walkie-talkies years ago via Mossad sources to the Hezbollah terror group. So we can be pretty certain that Israel does work on the way of countering the highly defensible nuclear sites there as well. However, the oil sites are a different aspect. They're very vulnerable, but we're going to go into that in a second here. Israel also had to reevaluate the potential targets after a Pentagon leak, where Israeli plans were made public about what sites to strike in Iran. Not only is this was that a massive blow to Israel, but also a national security blow to the United States, having someone inside the Pentagon leaking classified information of an ally to the public. Clearly a pro-Iranian source, someone spying for the regime, someone being sympathetic to the regime, being paid off by the regime, who leaked this information. It also shows that Israel will probably not share their plans in the future so much in advance again. At least it would be smarter not to do so because of the potential threat of leaks. Israel did not do this, for example, with the before the elimination of Hezbollah terror boss Nasrallah. When Israel conducted the operation against Nasrallah, the Americans were not aware of it until the last second. So while the operation was already underway, while the actual fighter jet targeting Nasrallah's location was already in the air. Only then President Biden was informed by the Israeli side. So Israel would be very well off by not sharing information, concrete information or concrete plans at least, too far, too early with the American partners, just because of the danger of leaks. So yeah, concluding the part about the nuclear sites, the threat remains. The regime will continue their enrichment goals here. So the Israelis will have to address this problem sometime in the future. The problem will be if Israel strikes Iran in the future without having had an attack against its territory to begin with. The international blowback will be even bigger than it is going to be now. So Israel needs to find a time window how to take out the nuclear program, and Israel will do so. Maybe Israel is waiting for the for more favorable administration in the White House. Donald Trump did say that Israel should target the nuclear sites and be done with it, basically. So maybe Israel is playing a very high stakes poker game here, trying to hope for a possible second Trump term, and then try to work with the new Trump administration on how to defeat or destroy, rather, the Iranian nuclear program. So yeah, it remains an open topic, an unresolved topic for Israel and its national security. Jumping to the last part of the potential targets that Israel could have aimed for, which are the oil fields, or even more importantly, the oil refineries. So Iran doesn't have too many oil refineries in the country, which makes them very juicy targets, if we can use that word here. They have the Abadan refinery in Isfahan. They have a refinery in Bandar Abbas. They have a refinery and also in Shazand. Overall, the total output of these major refineries is around 1.5 million barrels per day, plus minus. If we take a $85 per barrel price, that would be a daily revenue loss of around 129 million US dollars. That would be a massive blow to the Iranian regime and to the economy. It not only to their for the ability to export oil and make money, but also to use it domestically for the energy needs. It would have been the biggest hurt the Iranian regime could have felt if the oil sites would have been targeted. Of course, the Americans opposed this because they were afraid of global oil price spikes and the ripple effect on the global economy. However, if the Americans would have wanted, they could have approached this maybe a bit differently. They could have talked to Saudi Arabia and the UAE to maybe offset the production gaps that would have been caused by the lack of Iranian oil around the world. They could have also increased their own oil production, perhaps. Of course, there would have been impact to the world economy, and then this could have drawn even further anger against Israel. But then again, if Israel acts thinking about what the consequences would be from the international community in response to whatever Israel is doing, then Israel could not act in any way. We can see this. No matter what Israel does, there is always a condemnation against Israel. Israel is in a war of self-defense against Hezbollah for over a year, being targeted and fired upon, and there's literally nothing. The moment Israel reacts and moves actively against Hezbollah, there's worldwide condemnation. So in the end, Israel shouldn't care for its own national security interests, how the world will react to it. Everybody with the brain would be able to see, my oil prices went up now, but, well, the Israelis had no choice, right? But Then again, even if people would not see this, that's not Israel's problem, because these people who understand the conflict and understand the situation Israel's in wouldn't blame Israel for this. It's people who don't understand the conflict that could be swayed over by anti-Israel forces, but even more so, people who already hate Israel. They will always take anything as an excuse to blame Israel for everything. So it doesn't matter at this stage. When I said that it would have been the most effective way to cripple the Iranian regime, well, hurting the income source is always the best way to hurt any entity. The public support for the regime would have taken a massive blow, not just because of the actual problems on the ground that oil shortages could cause within the country, but also to the image of the regime. It would show that the regime cannot defend itself, and the very basics of providing its people with energy against Israel. So even people who are more apolitical or try to avoid any kind of political affiliation or just try to live their lives in Iran, they would definitely at this point be furious. Now, this could also backfire, and people could redirect their anger against Israel, of course, and saying, "Oh, it was the Israelis who struck us." But then again, so many Iranians have observed how the regime has treated them over the last decades. There's so much anger and frustration against the regime. So making the regime look even more incompetent than it already is would have been a calculated move by Israel to expose the regime as not being interested in caring for its own people, and only being interested in waging war against Israel, supplying a lot of money to foreign proxy entities instead of investing this money into domestic infrastructure, etc. Of course, it's a poker game here as well, because there's only so much these theoretical evaluations or societal and political evaluations can do. We won't know the actual reality until it happens, right? But nonetheless, it would have been Israel's best shot at really crippling the regime long term. But yeah, the Americans were strongly opposed to that, and the pressure was just too high for Israel to do it anyway. On the other side, on the other hand, we can say that Israel's restraint showed that it is capable of striking military targets, minimizing civilian losses, and minimizing the direct impact on the civilian population that an oil refinery strike would have had, and maybe shows the Iranian people that there's a force out there which will combat that regime that they despise themselves, and maybe this will embolden certain groups within Iran to rebel against the regime at a certain point of time in history. We will in the near history, in the near future, near to midterm future, we will see. However, the regime's capability of ruling and oppressing the country has not been impacted. So I don't think there's going to be any immediate change in the near time future after all. Now, before we go into the international reaction from across the world, let's start off with the United States, which had the best reaction. After all, America remains Israel's best ally, even with all the blunder that we can see from the Biden administration. So the United States reacted by emphasizing Israel's right to defend itself. It also highlighted how Israel made strong efforts to minimize the impact on civilians, targeting the military assets specifically, and called it a measured response compared to Iran, specifically targeting both military and civilian areas in Israel. But then again, of course, the United States will back up Israel it was the United States which pressured Israel to target the military sites and not nuclear on all sides to begin with. So, of course, they are going to reward Israel for doing what America wanted Israel to do, right? Then we have the European Union in their reaction. So the EU spokesperson for foreign affairs called all parties to cease hostilities immediately and prioritize diplomacy. The actual statement the spokesperson made in reaction to the Israeli retaliation said the following: Israel's retaliatory attack against Iran, as confirmed by the IDF, occurred amid severe and growing regional tensions. The dangerous cycle of attacks and retaliations risk causing a further expansion of the regional conflict. While acknowledging Israel's right to self-defense, the EU calls on all parties to exercise utmost restraint to avoid an uncontrollable escalation, which is in no one's interest. The EU remains fully committed to lowering tensions and contributing to de-escalation, and to this end remains in close contact with all relevant actors. So everything I quoted right now from the official website of the Diplomatic Service of the European Union, the External Action Office department here, is complete nonsense. There literally nothing in here has substance. Nothing in here means anything. It is as hollow as I don't know, pumpkin on Halloween. I have no words for this. It's absolutely naive. It is beyond naivety here. So while acknowledging Israel's right to self-defense, well, how do you defend yourself if you don't strike back? Like, you talk to them. That's kind of what it implies. You have to go for diplomacy. You have to go with talking. How do you talk with a genocidal regime, which literally, after Israel's counterstrike happened, put up massive billboards saying Israel will be wiped off the earth? Iran has called for Israel's destruction for decades, literally saying Israel would be a cancer and a tumor, and that Iran will remove it and wipe it away, basically. It is continuous threats for the genocide and the annihilation of an entire country. It's like the European Union, if it existed as an entity, would have told the Americans not to retaliate against Imperial Japan, because it would have increased tensions right after the Pearl Harbor attack. It's just absolute nonsense there. So we have, again, these empty shallow words coming from the EU. It comes to absolutely no surprise. The European Union is known for its condescending and patronizing foreign policy stances, especially when it comes to Israel. They're very pacifist positions, trying to resolve everything through diplomacy, even when diplomacy has long failed already. It's a very Neville Chamberlain-esque style of approach here, which also reflects in the European capacity of military production. We can see that the rich European Union is not capable of producing enough ammunition to supply their partner Ukraine against Russia, and Russia, a much poorer country and economically far behind Europe, in generally speaking, is far outproducing the European Union when it comes to military equipment or weapons in general. So yeah, Europe doing its usual thing there. So nothing surprising at all. Let's move on towards reactions from other countries around the world. The Russian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Maria Zakharova said that all aggressive actions by Israel have to end, and she warned that Israel's actions would escalate and destabilize the entire Middle East. Russia did not condemn Iran's missile barrage. They simply focused and condemned Israel's response, which should be the final nail in the coffin for people who still doubted the Russian-Iranian alliance. There's no doubt to it. Both countries are very close. Iran has been a main supplier for Shahed drones for Russia. Russia is helping out Iran. It's a mutually beneficial relationship, which brings them close together. And Russia has absolutely no score to sacrifice any relationship with Israel. Russia does not seek a direct confrontation with Israel, because that would mean that their forces in Syria would be endangered, and then they would have to fight the IDF, which would escalate into a war that Russia does not want. Russia cannot fight because Russia has other geopolitical considerations, mainly focusing on Ukraine. So, but still, nonetheless, on the diplomatic level, Russia standing fully behind Iran here. Turkey, also not a surprise at all, called Israel's retaliation an aggressive move that increases regional instability and something that increases the cycle of violence, and not mentioning Iran's role being a terror force in the Middle East for decades here, or the Iranian strike in early October at all. And Qatar saying similar things. Qatar reacted to Israel's retaliation as a provocation that threatened peace in the region, called Israel out with harsh words as well. Of course, not mentioning anything of the Iranian missile attacks against Israel. Those are no surprises. Turkey and Qatar, no surprise. Russia is not a surprise. Saudi Arabia as well, though, condemned Israel for the strikes, saying that it escalates an already tense situation. So yeah, all the criticism the kingdom there makes is aimed against Israel. On the other hand, we have to say that Saudi Arabia likely does it to save face towards their own people, and also because they have been under increased pressure for not doing enough for the Palestinians in Gaza. So we have to take this level into account here as well. So yeah, the question remains what Iran is going to do next. The immediate Iranian reaction by Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi from Iran was that saying that Iran has absolutely no limits in its approach to defend itself, and said that any Israeli further actions will result in immediate and severe repercussions. And because of the fact that he said that Iran has no limits, Iran signals it keeps the options open to respond to Israel's retaliation. Probably their Security Council will meet in the coming days, discuss how and if Iran should directly react to this, or if they are going to do it through their proxies, which, I mean, Hamas and Hezbollah and the Houthis and the Iraqi militias are already involved in attacking Israel. So there's not much more Iran can do except for telling them keep attacking Israel, keep maybe asking Hezbollah to increase rocket launches against Israel somehow, if they don't want a direct confrontation. But nonetheless, Iran knows that if they react to Israel's retaliation, Israel will strike even stronger. And then Israel might not just go for military sites, but all sides, nuclear sites. So it will be a cost-benefit analysis that Iran has to take here to see if this is worth it. Again, rhetoric from Iran is one thing. Their capability of following up with what they're claiming is a different one, right? So yeah, these are the international reactions so far and Iran's reactions. We will see what's going to happen in the next coming days. So for now, all we can do is to keep an eye out for anything the Iranian regime does, Security Council meetings, troop movements, specific deployments, etc. So yeah, in conclusion, the Israeli retaliation was not a real payback against Iran. It is not something that will hurt the regime really long term. It is a setback on their offensive capabilities against Israel for now, but it's not something that really puts the pain to the regime. Israel basically gave Iran a way out, which is also something that reports indicated that Israel wanted the Iranian regime to be able to save face somehow towards their own people as well. So, and also appease America and American pressure. So yeah, the Israelis wanted to balance a significant or a meaningful retaliation with a retaliation that does not anger the regime so far that it would strike back against Israel again. But then we will see if this strategy worked out, or if the Iranian regime did feel that the Israeli strike was too strong. It is a international Game of Thrones or House of Cards style game, of course, where everybody is playing poker and everybody is going to look what the possible move of the other side could be. You could also call it a chess game if you like. So yeah, so much for this episode right now. Thank you so much for listening, and until next time.